Let's talk vinyl.
Indie rocker Mike Fox is cracking open his record collection, one album at a time. If you're listening on a regular podcast app, you'll get the vinyl talk, but if you want the full experience, music and all, smash that link in the show description and tune in on Mixcloud. Here's your host, Mike Fox.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Vinyl. I'm your host, Mike Fox. First of all, it's great to be back, and I'll tell you where I've been later on. But I'll tell you one thing, I'll give you one clue. It wasn't in Monterey, California, where the famous 3-day concert in the year 1967 had set the stage for what is known in history books as the Summer of Love. That's the name of the opening track that you just heard from Eric Burdon and the Animals, or dare I say, the legendary Eric Burdon and the Animals. And in this episode, we're diving into the greatest hits of Eric Burdon and the Animals. Now, when I say greatest hits, I'm referring to a compilation album released in the year 1969. Now, the song that you heard on Mixcloud, Monterey, tells the story of the Monterey Pop Festival from 1967. Burdon makes several legendary band name drops, including the Byrds, Jefferson Airplane, the Grateful Dead, and of course, Jimi Hendrix. This song transports you to that festival, which I couldn't have experienced myself. Are you experienced? Since I wasn't born until 13 years after it took place. I'm not a huge fan of compilation albums, especially since this one exclusively covers the reincarnation of the Animals. The original Animals lineup consisted of Eric Burdon, of course, on vocals, Alan Price on keyboards and organ, Hilton Valentine on guitar, Chas Chandler on bass, and John Steele on drums. Now, don't get me wrong, I do enjoy the songs from the new Animals. Well, they were dubbed new at the time, but now this compilation album is almost 60 years old. Eric Burdon is about 85. Now, as for the new Animals at the time, Eric Burdon was the lead vocalist of this new reincarnation, but he had new sidemen, John Weeder on guitar, violin, and on bass, Vic Briggs on guitar and piano, and Danny McCulloch on bass. I appreciate the sound that this band created at the time. It was very current for the era, incorporating psychedelic elements, but not just being limited to that sound. There was still that Eric Burdon soul that you heard in the original Animals, with touch of folk as well as progressive rock. Now, what I find fascinating is that in 1968, Andy Summers of The Police had replaced Briggs, and Summers had also been in another psychedelic British band before joining Eric Burdon's Animals, Dandelions Chariot before that. The reason I decided to do an episode on a compilation that I just recently picked up at a store called Attic Mice at the South Mall in Allentown, Pennsylvania, is this is not your typical store. It's more of a collectible store. It's not a record store, but it has secondhand collectibles from toys, vinyl, trading cards. But this record only costs $3, which I'll admit, every time I hear that price come up, it makes me think about that's the amount that Harold Ramis had bet on Bill Murray not being able to do 5 push-ups at the beginning of Stripes. However, he did succeed. Anyway, I digress. This compilation album features many of the songs that Eric Burdon and the Animals had recorded during that late 60s period, and I really enjoy these songs that were handpicked for this $3 purchase. But it's well worth it. I have to tell you something. I recently fell into an Eric Burdon rabbit hole, and I can't seem to get out of it. I am not just into the Animals as well as Eric Burdon and the Animals, but I'm also into some of his solo work, and the fact that he's still a living legend at the time of the recording of this episode, I wonder if he's going to go on tour again, because I recently saw a video of him from about 2 years ago, singing the Animals' first big hit with the original lineup, House of the Rising Sun. Now, I want to get to the music right now, as that's the reason that I have this show. And again, I always encourage people who were listening on a regular podcast app or are listening on a regular podcast app presently, please click on that link in the show description, that clickable link, so you can hear the vinyl music with me. And after this song, I'm going to talk about why the original Animals broke up, leading to this reincarnation of a new band called Eric Burdon and the Animals. And just a spoiler alert, I will do an episode not too long from now that will be about an album that had the original 5 members, and it's not their first album, but it is actually their last album in 1983 called Arc. And I just ordered it on eBay. I'm so excited. I can't wait to hear how that sounds on vinyl. But the next song I'm going to drop the needle on is a very groovy song called San Francisco Nights. Oh, such a beautifully mellow and beautifully crafted song. I love the chords. I love the composition. I love Eric Burdon's voice. I wish I could sing like Eric Burdon, but I can't. I have a very deep Lou Reed type voice. But let's talk about how the Animals had broken up in 1966 and why that had happened at the height of their popularity. Now, even though they were at their peak, there was some disappointment from the band over their final album at the time with not all original members, because there was one slight change in lineup from the first album on, but they were experimenting with new sounds on Animalism. It was a departure from their R&B sound, that quintessential sound. This showed the band doing different things. This album showed the band experimenting with new sounds that were very modern at the time. It had a looser, more extemporaneous sound than previous albums. And the band was enjoying this new artistic freedom, but the album failed to chart, and that was a huge bummer for the band, huge disappointment. So that was likely one factor. They were also super exhausted from touring, and there was a lot of leadership disputes as well. So this led to Eric Burdon starting a new direction with Eric Burdon and the Animals. All original 5 members had only been on one album to date at that point, the self-titled debut. But that would change in 1977 with the release of their first reunion album, Before We Were So Rudely Interrupted. That was the name of it, Before We Were So Rudely Interrupted, followed by their coda album, Arc, which, again, I'm going to do an episode on that. It's in the mail. I can't wait to receive it. It's sealed, too. Now, I dig both of those records. Now, again, I can't wait to have my hands on Arc. But the opening track, Monterey, on this episode was featured on the album The Twain Shall Meet. San Francisco Nights, I almost say San Francisco Nights, was on their debut 1967 album titled Winds of Change. Sky Pilot is also a great song that's included on this record compilation. It was written, obviously, during the Vietnam War. It's about the Vietnam War. Now, just listen to Eric Burdon's emotional story if you haven't heard this song. You might have heard it already if you're a big Eric Burdon and the Animals fan. Now, this song managed to reach number 14 in the U.S. pop charts. And the song refers to a military chaplain who blesses a body of troops just before they're set on an overnight raid and then retires to await their return. Now, the song that I'm going to close with is a track called Year of the Guru. Year of the Guru, it's such a tongue twister, is a 1968 psychedelic rock song by Eric Burdon and the Animals, and it was from their album Every One of Us, featuring a spoken word rap style that satirizes the late 60s trend of following spiritual leaders. Now, the song explores themes of blind devotion, mental manipulation, and eventual self-realization. Often considered one of the earliest recorded examples of rock rap. Eric Burdon was so ahead of his time. Now, on the next episode, I'm going to do a shameless self-promotion album episode, as that's where I've been. That's why you haven't had an episode since February. It's about my new album, Authenticity Boulevard, that you can actually now buy on ElasticStage.com. But if you happen to be in the Bethlehem area, there are 2 copies for sale at a place called Railroad Records. Shout out to them. Great store in Bethlehem on Vine Street. So keep supporting your local record store while we're on that subject. Post pictures on social media of you shopping there. I always encourage people to experience the way it was meant to be experienced, authentically. I'm Mike Fox with Let's Talk Vinyl. Till next time, I'll catch you on the B-side. And we will close with Year of the Guru.